breakfast puppies?
This podcast contains adult language and content and is meant for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm Kevin Siembieda of Palladium Books, and you're listening to the Glitterbois.
Hi, welcome back, everyone. We're here with Kevin Siembieda of Palladium Books, and today we're talking about the one that I've been waiting for three years now?
We've been doing this about 3 years.
3 years, yeah. Today, I hold in my hand one of the relics of a bygone age, one of my treasured possessions, the first role-playing game that I actually played with other living people I wasn't related to, Robotech, the role-playing game. This wonderful, wonderful book came into my grubby little paws very early in 8th grade. And you can directly, sadly, track the course of my grades taking a bit of a hit as it absolutely consumed my life. This was not my first exposure to Robotech. I had grown up watching the cartoon, and I believe I had read one of the books. I believe they were being released about the same time.
Yeah. But
this, with its art, I spent hours trying to replicate Kevin Long's Veritex. Just the most gorgeous technical drawings I'd ever seen, and I'd never seen black and white come to this level before. And we sat around before school, after school, during lunch, when we were out supposed to be doing everything else, doing this. So, Kevin, it is fair to say this book had a bit of an impact on young Matthew, and I think a lot of people growing up in the tail end of Generation X, this had a huge impact on us because we had never... There was no such thing as a tech manual back then. Like maybe BattleTech had one or two out.
BattleTech had already been doing technical readouts by then. There were a couple other games, but
nothing had like the exploded cockpit features or like how does the what are the lever systems? Like it was amazing.
We won't talk about Phoenix Command, but
okay, we won't. Yeah. So this was happening, and it was a huge thing at the time. Robotech was a story, and we won't go into the whole Macross thing. That's a story for another day. But Robotech was a story and a cartoon that was on that had continuity. When people died, they were dead. They weren't coming back the next episode. There were real world consequences. There was heartbreak and love and betrayal and allegiances and like a whole arc of personal growth. It was an amazing story to drop in front of children.
Politics.
Yeah.
And music.
And music, yeah.
The power of love.
And then this book came about, and we had the opportunity to be in it in a way that was just wild. So, Kevin, my first of many questions to you today is, how did this come to you? Were you a fan of it before? Were you aware of it, or was it something that was offered to you? How did you and Robotech meet?
So, yeah, I was familiar with it before we did the role-playing game, obviously. And by the way, I think we predate the Jack McKinney books by a few months.
Okay.
Because they were using our books as reference. Because like you said,
Nice.
while there was this awesome Japanese book called Perfect Memory, if you could find it, because it was an import, it was beautiful. They had some of the cutaways and a bunch of the model sheet art, which was not crisp and clean like what you get in a role-playing game, because they're mostly copies of pencil art. They're beautiful, but so I discovered the game through a friend, Richard Burke, and Richard was working for me at the time, and he knew I wanted to launch my Mega Damage system. And Robotech started to appear in my part of the country at like 4:30 in the morning. And it's bizarre because it didn't dawn on me to tape it
Right.
on a VHS recorder. And I sat back and went, Richard, I don't care how good this damn thing is. I'm not getting up at 4:30 in the freaking morning to watch this. I had 2 little kids at the time. And, I said, I'm usually going to bed around that time because I was a night owl. I would work till 4 or 5 in the morning, sometimes 6. But I'm working. I'm not watching TV, and everyone else is asleep. And we had a small house at the time. I didn't want to disturb everybody. So I'm like, it's not happening, man. And he's like, but Kevin, you don't understand. This is everything you've talked about. This is the perfect vehicle for it. Because up until then, we had printed, I think, Mecha Damage rule conversions for the Mechanoids in the Magic of Palladium books, or some flyer we gave out at conventions. I think it was a flyer that we gave out at conventions, a little 2-sheet, 4-sheet thing. And he's like, but Kevin, you'll love this. You got to watch it. And I'm like, yeah. And then one day it had gotten switched to like 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. And my kids had just gotten done watching Thundercats or something of that ilk. And, I can hear sounds and noises and stuff going on. And I come out and I'm like, what are you guys watching? They're like, we don't know, but it's really cool, Kev. Because they're my stepkids, right? And so they called me Kevin or Kev. And I sit down to watch it with them. And it's my first introduction to Robotech was, as you said, Matt, people die, and they die for real. And so it was the episode with the bombardment of Earth.
Yeah.
And there's that classic scene where you have the National Guardsman or Army guy standing there, and his little girl's handing him a flower, and he's like, "What's your name, little girl?" And it's like, "Whoa!" And they're like atomized, and I'm like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
And I watched the rest of the episode, fixated. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is an amazing show. And of course, I caught several other episodes. And I go to Rick Burke and I'm like, Rick, why do you tell me the show's amazing? And he's like, what? I did tell you it was amazing. I told you had to watch it. They're like, no, you need to grab me by my lapels and say, Kevin, get up at freaking 4:30 in the morning, damn it. You got to see the show. So, so I fell in love with the show. Thankfully, my comic book store, Reader's Exchange, which was owned and run by Gary Reed, who would go on to start Caliber Comics, or Caliber Press, I should say.
Oh, okay.
That did Dead World and The Crow and a bunch of other Baker Street, a bunch of well-known comics that really took off back in the day. And Gary was pretty on top of, the fan culture, and he was renting undubbed. Back then they called it Japanimation. Yeah. Undubbed anime. And I'm one of those guys where I need to know the story. I can't just watch it and go, oh, the pretty pictures. I fall asleep or I get bored. But anyways, he had some undubbed episodes, and he had a bunch of stuff, toys and books and stuff that came. I got my Perfect Memory from him. I got a bunch of Veritech toys.
Cool.
From him, my Armored Veritech, all that kind of stuff. And thankfully, Palladium was starting to make money, so I could afford this stuff because it was not cheap. And I fell in love with it. And I'm like, you're right, Rick. We got to go and find how we can get this license. This is amazing. So that was the next step, was to find out how we could acquire it. And I've told the story before, but so I am now. It's like a month. I've seen most of the episodes of, certainly the rest of Macross part of the series, and starting to get into the Southern Cross, which is personally my least favorite.
Agreed.
It's just the most convoluted of them, and kind of silly. Parts of it are just plain out. What? And none of those characters behave like any military person on the planet Earth throughout history. They're such sissies and babies and whiners. It's like, oh my God, just shouldn't these guys be court-martialed? And I mean, lined up and shot, court-martialed.
They're awful.
That's a whole other thing. And I probably just insulted half your audience, because I know a lot of people love Southern Cross. But I was not one of them. I mean, I like Dana. Dana was cool. Bowie was all right.
I like Zor. Zor was okay.
But so we reach out to find out how we can get Robotech. And Alex is my research guy. So Alex Marcinison. So he tracked down that Harmony Gold owned the IP. And I call up Harmony Gold and I'm talking to the licensing agent. And I don't even let this person talk. I just give my pitch. And I get done and I'm like, okay, what do you think? And the person says, well, I think that was like one of the best pitches, maybe the best pitch I've ever heard. And I'm like, yes. And then they're like, but I'm sorry, I've been negotiating with Steve Jackson Games
Yeah,
for the
that's
last
right.
3 months. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, if the deal should fall through, let me know. And he's like, hey, Kevin, I'm sorry, but I expect to get a signed contract faxed over any minute.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, okay, well, if this should fall through for some reason, please give me a call. And I hang up the phone and I'm just chastising myself and beating myself up because Rick Burke had told me about, the show like 3-4 months earlier. And had I acted immediately, there would be no problem. And I'm like, what a moron. And of course, someone like Steve Jackson would be after this IP with Car Wars. It's just perfect. This would be a perfect sister product. And, and I'm just stomping around the kitchen, calling myself all kinds of names. And my wife, Marianne, says, it was like something out of Star Wars. I don't know. I have a feeling. I have a good feeling about it. I think they're going to call you back. And I'm like, there's no way they're calling me back. Steve would have to be crazy to let this go. He's been working on it for 3 months. And she's like, I don't know. I got a feeling they're going to call you back. And they're going to call you back today. And I'm like, you're insane, woman. 3 hours later, they called me back.
Isn't that creepy how they do that sometimes? They just know things.
Yeah.
There's a frequency we do not have.
And the licensing agent's like, so Kevin, you won't believe this. I don't believe it. He goes, but the person who lined up the whole deal, Ray Greer, he didn't have the authority to finalize the deal. And when he took it to Steve Jackson, Steve said, the royalty is way too high. The guarantee is way too high. I'm not going to do this. And so if you still want it, it's 3 hours later. Of course I still want it. If you still want it,
this isn't years later.
I'm sure we can work this out. And we did. And I was thrilled. And I didn't think the license was too high. But I probably knew it better than Steve. I mean, I got the impression that Ray Greer was the real fan of Robotech and saw the potential, and that Steve wasn't really familiar with it, and wasn't really interested in licensing, which I can understand. Licensing can be a pain in the neck. So we hammered out a deal. I got it. And, I'm ranting and raving to Eric Wojcik how this is going to be fantastic, but I got to find a really great artist. I could do some of the art myself, but I hate doing machines because they're so technical and you got to use, ellipses and French curves and rulers, and you got to be very precise because my philosophy is if it's metal, it should look hard.
Yeah.
And straight lines and all that. And it takes a lot of time. And Eric says, I think I have an artist for you.
Oh boy, did he ever.
Yes, he did.
I went to the Center for Creative Studies open house and I saw this guy, Kevin Long. And I think he's great. And in fact, I should use Eric's voice because it's more like, yeah, Kev, I got this great guy for you. He does a lot of industrial design and then it's beautiful work. I've got him doing some freelance stuff for me. And he introduces me to Kevin Long. We meet. We instantly hit it off. Kev sees Robotech and he's like, I'm in, I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
And he really understood my vision, what I wanted to give the fans, because I knew the fans didn't have beautiful, clean, gorgeous shots of these famous mecha designs. And, in Perfect Memory, they have some of those cutaways you're gushing about. And I'm like, Kev, I want you to do some of these cutaways. I want you to do, just these dynamic poses and clean, super clean, beautiful art.
Mm-hmm.
That was Kevin's specialty. He was big into doing all kinds of stuff in the commercial art field. He was working at a commercial studio at the time, advertising studio. And this would be a fun, part-time job for him. So he was all in and, man, just kicked ass.
Yeah.
I agree. I never knew that this almost wasn't, that Steve Jackson almost had this. And that would have been tragic because the local retailer we had did not carry Steve Jackson games.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it never would have come. It never would have happened.
The closest I had ever heard was I knew that Steve Jackson games at one point had interest in it.
Yeah.
But that was as far as I knew. I did not realize it was like that close.
Almost there.
Oh, it made doing the contract super easy. I mean, I think I had a signed contract in like 2 or 3 weeks later.
Oh wow.
Because
that's warp
Steve
speed.
and Ray Greer had hammered out 90% of the details.
Nice.
And I just had to, read it, have my attorney go over it and make a few tweaks. And we were in and done. So thank you, Steve Jackson. I do know Steve. He's a great guy. So, and I'm sure there were no hard feelings. I'm sure he's glad. I know he was glad that we got the license and did such a great job with it. But it was crazy. So that was very cool. And then I just want to mention, and I always try to mention this because I think it's amazing. So Jack McKinney is actually 2 guys.
Yeah.
It's a 2-man writing team that work under the name Jack McKinney. They also work under their own names, and sadly, I forget what their names are. At least one of them is something
Brian Daly,
cool
I think.
sounding that's Italian, but both really nice guys because they called the office one day and they're like, "We're Jack McKinney and." And we want to, much like you guys were just saying at the opening, it's like, we want to thank you for this because it's beautiful and it's amazing and you've got details that none of us know.
Nice.
Because I tried to, one of the first things we did is when Harmony Gold sent us model sheets, and then we made photocopies from pages out of that book, Memory Perfect or Perfect Memory. And we had a Wayne State University professor translate it for us. Now the problem with the translations were like when it came to missiles, so it was cool because it had, the metrics were like the size and that kind of thing. But for like missiles, the notes were like many and many.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, how many are many? But anyways, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So we're talking to me. So it's sort of an inside tribute to Rick Burke. I made him a character in the RDF manual.
Oh.
So he was Dr. Richard Burke.
Oh, yeah.
Like the assistant or right-hand man to Dr. Lang.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the McKinneys were using our books as a reference. They would call us up and go, "What's the next book? How soon can we get it?" Kind of thing.
They had a hectic schedule too.
Yes. Yeah, they banged out books like crazy.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Richard Burke made it into the novels.
Nice.
Yeah.
Smooth.
So I thought it was beautiful that Rick got this lasting tribute because he's really the guy who turned me on to it. I wouldn't have known about Robotech without Richard Burke.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very cool. So that was just a nice thing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Kevin, I'd like to take a step back to something I heard you say at the very beginning of this tale, which is that you were looking to do a game with Mega Damage before Robotech happened.
Yes.
Tell me more about this. I want to know the history of Mega Damage. How did Mega Damage, because up until this point, Mega Damage was a Robotech thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Yeah. So where did this come from and how did it develop?
I just, so, when you're designing games, you're always tweaking things and readdressing things and looking at stuff and thinking, how could I have done this or that better? And at this point, we had the Palladium fantasy game and we had Heroes Unlimited. And Heroes Unlimited has robots and cyborgs and things in it. And obviously, they're super powered. So that got me thinking in the Mega Damage area. And plus, we had done I think we had done at this point, or we're talking about doing it, we're in the middle of doing it, was our contemporary weapon book.
Mm-hmm.
And to research it, I was buying all kinds of military journals and Jane's, which was the authority at the time.
Love those, yeah.
Jane's military journals. And
You're describing my bookshelf as a child.
there you go. and I mean, they were the definitive reference, right? And that included a book on tanks and some other armored vehicles and things. And so I kept looking at these and thinking, wow, if you make power armor or giant robots, because there are already giant robots around. I mean, Astro Boy had been out for at least a decade or two. And we were familiar with Gigantor and some other robot shows, and they got me thinking about, man, these things are so powerful. It's like they're Mega Damage. And so I came up with the Mega Damage idea, which is much like a tank. I mean, you can take a fire axe or you can take a shotgun and blast and chop away all day long at a tank, and you're not going to do any damage to it. I mean, you might scuff it up. You might put in a couple dings and dents and wreck the paint job, but you're not going to harm that vehicle one iota. And I just liked that idea. And I was trying to figure out a way to incorporate it, and I came up with Mega Damage.
Nice.
But then to really give it a powerful debut, I was really looking for something special that we could introduce it with. And I was thinking about doing another version of the Mechanoids, but that just had a sort of a cult following. It was not one of our big hits. People who love it, but it wasn't a smash hit. So I was looking for something to introduce it in next. And Robotech dropped in our lap, and we're like, yes, perfect.
What a
Because if those
debut.
aren't Mega Damage vehicles, I don't know what are.
Right.
Right.
On that, I'm going to drop from prehistory and go just a little side note from our Discord questions. Did you come up with the term mini missile?
I think so, yeah. Because,
Okay.
I mean, they had these little missiles.
Yeah,
and it was like, what else are they? They're like mini missiles.
Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm the guy who came up with mini missiles. And, it's funny because I've done a lot of stuff that you see that appears elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I read so much and I watch so much. Sometimes I'm like we talked about how I subconsciously stole Victor Laszlo from Casablanca. He's one of the main characters in Casablanca. And I didn't even realize it until years later. But I'm pretty sure I came up with mini missiles completely on my own.
Yeah, it's weird because things like that enter the lexicon, and then we have no more control over it. It's out there,
Right. Well, I mean, same thing with ley lines and nexus points.
Yeah.
And that whole concept of, dimensional portals appear at ley line nexus points. And I'm like, I don't think I saw that anywhere until
Right.
I just want to say, Kevin, your vision of ley lines defined the concept to me as a young reader.
Agreed.
I had never heard of the term ley line before. So now, after playing Rifts as a kid and getting used to that one picture, we know that picture.
Yeah.
The ley line,
the canyon. Yeah.
Oh God, that picture. That is what a ley line in my brain looks like. So whenever I just happen to read fiction that has no connection whatsoever with Palladium or Rifts, or maybe it's even like historical stuff where some people are talking about Wiccanism or something, and they're like ley lines, and it's like badass.
Yeah. But you want to put a guard on it because you never know when people are going to come out of it.
Exactly. That's how ley lines are in my brain now and forever.
Agreed. Like when I read Mercedes Lackey, like The Last Herald Mage and stuff like that, I I still see the glowing blue line.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's never going away.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, not well, no, in fact, to be fanboy, because this is my chance to do it. And, you've agreed and we're already here. So I could just say how much you've actually influenced my own personal, and I imagine both of you gentlemen's, way of seeing what you put out in your books hit us at just the right time.
Yeah.
To go into our learning phase, but not at the child level, at that young teen level. And it embedded there. And it's just like, that is how I see ley lines. These are, Kevin Long does robots. That's how robots look to me. I mean, this is just how things are.
Circling back to Mini Missile, I did have a quick question. Did you ever consider trademarking the term Mini Missile?
I haven't.
Okay. Just because, and there's a weird story associated with this, just because I happen to be aware that one of the major defense contractors, I think it was General Dynamics, but don't quote me on it, had a internal kerfuffle at some point when they were doing potted self-guided submunitions from a cruise missile platform, basically a modification of the JDAM submunition concept. That they had to ban inside the office referring to the self-guided submunitions as mini missiles. So I was wondering if there'd ever been and this was all going on right before Gulf War I, and so I was wondering if there'd ever been like a attempt to trademark the term mini missile, or if it was just the suits not liking the fact that they had a bunch of geeks on their development team.
I guarantee it's the second. Yeah.
I guarantee it is, given the number of Robotech and Battletech fans kicking around who are work in the defense industry. It's not uncommon at all.
Oh no, yeah, the military, there's a ton of people. Oh, it makes sense. So if you're playing, so the worst part of being there's a lot of worst parts being in a armed conflict or war, but one of the worst parts for soldiers is waiting,
boredom
in between assignments, and role playing, because it's so immersive. When you role play, you can really lose yourself in it, and you lose track of time, and you're having fun with your buddies, and it's that escape from a very painful and life and death reality that's very welcome. So a lot of people in the military play our game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went, "Hey, mini missiles, real life."
Right.
No, it's a recurring story when people. So we have a Discord server, and one of our rules for the Discord server is that when you join, you just need to say something about yourself, because we want to meet people who come, and also we don't want bots who just farm and spam and whatnot. So very simple. You sign in, you say hello, and almost every single time that someone comes in, they tell us a quick story about how they got into the game. And I'll tell you, like, a good 40% or so, I think, I started playing Palladium on deployment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. And this actually goes into Robotech, because I was mentioning how the whole pre-Gulf War I thing. One of the things is a good portion of my gaming groups included veterans. One of the weird things about where I grew up is it was not uncommon to sit down at a table and find yourself playing with a bunch of high schoolers all the way up through 40-year-olds and sometimes even 50-year-olds.
Yep.
So the group that I originally started playing Recon with didn't like most other military RPG games because it didn't have the right feel. It was too clean, yada, yada, yada. Boy, were they happy to switch over to Palladium Robotech. Because one, turns out a lot of them were fans, and two, the feel of the game was right.
Yeah.
Especially when Southern Cross came out and everyone could start complaining about their MOS
and their high commands,
and how they got sorted into their MOS.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the crossover there is not insubstantial.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we always try to create a particular feel and atmosphere, and this was a war story. So I wanted to have a military feel to it. And it could have been more military feeling, but at the same time, I also want to get, civilians into it. So I didn't want to use just military jargon and stuff. And I thought we cut a nice blend, for appealing to both segments of the market.
I think you've walked that path fairly well, not only in Robotech, but in most of the properties that you do. It's available to both, but it's kind of like, if you want to know more, here are some key terms that will lead you further in that direction, Yep.
So how did you end up stumbling onto the videotape rights? Was that part of the initial package, or did that come later? Because at one point...
Stumbling into what?
The videotape rights, because at one time you were distributing the video cassettes for Robotech.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. So we came out with Robotech, and it did great. And before I go into that, I just want to point out that people don't know it because the RPG has just some line art on the back, and it was supposed to be a wraparound cover.
Oh, was it?
And in fact, I have the whole finished cover in my office,
Kevin.
And it's like the rest of this asteroid belt goes off, and you have the SDF-3,
what?
Or excuse me, SDF-1 rather, and a bunch of cool shit, and a bunch of other, Valkyries.
Oh, don't tease me, man. I've looked at this 1,000 times.
The reason it never got on it is I needed to send it to the printer, and Kevin worked in airbrush.
Yeah.
And so everything is airbrush. It looks magnificent, but the SDF-1 is completely unfinished. It's just a pencil drawing, and it's only like that big, but you couldn't send it in without that. And we thought, well, someday, Kev, finish it up and we'll send it in with, the whole cover. And we never did. But yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Do you still have it?
It's in his office. Yeah.
Yep.
We got to see that picture. Help us.
Yeah. Let's, after we wrap, we'll do a private showing that our viewers will be jealous of. Our viewers, our listeners.
Yeah.
So the videotape, that was kind of wild. I felt bad for Live Entertainment because they're the people who released the videotapes originally. There's some big national company. I don't know if they still exist or not, but I think they meant well. They just didn't understand their market.
Yeah.
So they wanted to come out with a box set. I want to say it was like $50, maybe 90. I don't think it was that much in 1986, 87, 88. So they came out with a box set. And the problem was for them to squeeze all the episodes in.
Yeah.
They had to cut 20 seconds here, 40 seconds there. And they cut out what they thought was pretty innocuous stuff that people wouldn't miss, except they didn't realize Robotech fans are fanatics.
That's
so
putting it mildly.
They would be watching an episode and be like, "Where's the freaking floating tuna?"
Yeah.
or the scene where Rick tells Minmay this or that, or it's this little flashing scene, and the fans just went crazy.
Oh no!
If it was these days, the anger went viral, and they just tore Live Entertainment to shreds and totally panned the VHS tapes. And I wasn't happy either. I'm one of those fans. I'm not quite as rabid. I understand why they did it, but I was disappointed. And because I bought the set, of course, the second it came out. So I was familiar with the product. And one day we get a call from some top guy at Live Entertainment. And he explains what happened and that they've heard really great things about us. They've seen our books. They look wonderful. They understand that the fans love our stuff, that we, really understand what the fans want. And would I like to buy the VHS tape rights for the rest of the series. And I'm like, holy moly. I said, well, one, we don't do videotapes, and two, we don't know anything about video, and I doubt I can afford it. I mean, I'm thinking, and it was kind of big bucks for the day.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'll tell you what, he says, I will let you have it for just what it cost us to get. And which was fairly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and the other wrinkle is you would only have the rights for like 18 months or 19 months. So you'd have to act really quickly.
Wow.
And I thought about it for like 5 seconds. And it was one of those times where I didn't consult with my wife. I didn't consult with the team. I'm just like, how much? Yeah, we can do that. I'm in. Well, first I said, well, you can't do that because we didn't have sub-licensing rights in our country. We're a little company.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, they didn't let us sub-license the rights. And he goes, yeah, we can sign a simple sub-licensing agreement. It'll be like 1 or 2 pages. And you'll have it for the rest of our duration, which is, like I said, about 18 months. And, I'm like, yeah. So we sign it, and then I'm all excited, and I come out, and I'm like, guess what just happened? I bought the VHS rights to Robotech. And my wife is like, you did what? Kevin Long and the guys are like, what are we going to do with those? I mean, we're a book company. We don't know shit about VHS tapes or manufacturing or any of that. And so, I mean, we dived into it with both feet very fast and tracked down. We talked to several California companies, and they were really inexpensive. But a lot of them were bragging about how they use illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
And not in particularly nice terms.
Nope.
And that bothered me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up going to a place in Chicago. It cost us like 2 or 3 times as much for the duplication.
Do you
the
recall
packaging.
the name?
MediaTek.
Okay. I'm actually familiar with them, weirdly
Really?
enough. Strictly because coming from Minnesota and the cultural epicenter that is the St. Paul, Minneapolis, Twin Cities zone, and having had to dabble a bit in this, just supporting some friends through their business ventures, MediaTek would, as long as you had a solid plan and were serious about your negotiations, they would hear your pitch from just about anybody. Oh, you're a small orchestra that wants duplications of your live performance? Mm-hmm. Sure, we can do this. MediaTek would work with you.
Yeah, and MediaTek was great, by the way, to work with.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still exist, but they were wonderful to work with because they helped walk us through things. And, we got the master tapes, and, we don't know what to do with this stuff. And we just kind of explained what we needed. And, of course, we did the box art and all that. We could do all that. And they were just wonderful to work with. They never missed a deadline. I didn't think their prices were insane. So that was fantastic. So we're off to the races. And we, I call up at the time, we had 72 distributors worldwide. And I personally call up every single one of them, tell them what we're doing. And all of them but one, Hobby Games also in Illinois someplace. Ed Lukács, I love that guy. A good guy. He ordered a whopping 26 because we decided to start with Sentinels because I said, well, I need to test this, and I'm not an idiot. If Sentinels doesn't go well, then we need to kill this and just take the loss. But we did Sentinels coming along, did a beautiful cover for it. And I call up all these distributors and I'm like, this is what's going on. Anime's the next big freaking thing. People are dying for Robotech. People go insane that we give them the first 3 episodes of Sentinels, which was Robotech 2, the Sentinels. And it was everyone talked about it, knew about it, but no one had seen it. And every single person said, why would we want a videotape? We don't do videotapes. We're game distributors. And Ed took 26 copies because, in his words, well, Kev, we carry everything Palladium does. So if you're doing videotapes, we'll take 26.
Mhm.
So no distributor. And I said, I called Ed back and said, I appreciate it, but it's I'm not going to sell just 26 copies, and we're going to I had to pivot, right? So I said, we're going to just offer them direct to the fans. We're going to do ads in Dragon Magazine and maybe Marvel Comics, and just make them available directly to our fans. And everyone was good with that, right? Because they carry games. They don't do VHS tapes. And nobody saw the potential, even though you started to have, I think, Animego and a couple other companies. What was a big one? Viz? Stuff was starting to come out. Like Captain Harlock was coming out on tape, and Kimba the White Lion, and Astro Boy, and some other stuff. And they're all like
Star
instant
Blazers
smash hits that are selling like crazy. But no one really saw the market. And I said, I think this is going to be huge. So we'll just go direct. And it was funny because the guys were like, oh, Kev, yeah, we thought this was a bad idea. And Marianne was like, honey, I trust you all the time, and you make good decisions, but I don't know. I don't know about this one. In fact, if it doesn't sell, this is on you. And I'm like, isn't it always on me? I mean, I'm the president, founder of the company. So it looked bad because no distributor would take it. We don't know video distributors. So we make it available, direct mail. We do our first ads in Dragon Magazine, and those things are just blowing out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, we must have sold 1,000 copies in the first couple of weeks.
Just the Sentinels?
Yeah, this is Robotech 2, the Sentinels.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because we have to sell them directly, we don't know what's going to happen. I think we were charging, which is a lot of money in 1989. This is 1989. I think we were charging 20 or 30 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still just shooting out the door. And of course, the quality was beautiful. MediaTek just delivered beautiful, beautiful, high quality, high resolution film, on the VHS tapes. And they looked amazing, sounded amazing. And so word of mouth is spreading. And next thing we know, Capital City was a big distributor back in the day, and they would have their top 10. And next thing we know, Sentinels is number one on their list. And so we start doing, the next batch of which is Southern Cross and New Generation. And we get a call. I start getting a call. I get like gazillions of calls from my distributors. Kevin, I can't believe you're not letting us carry these. What are you doing, buddy? And I'm like, no. I called each and every one of you guys. I begged you to carry this stuff. You said, no, we're not a videotape distributor. They're like, yeah, okay, we did. We're sorry. When can we get these tapes? And I'm like, well, I can't just, pull the plug. So I said, give me 3 months, and then I'll start selling them to you guys. Plus, I'll have the next several tapes coming out. And that's what we did. And that little investment, because we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, not 10, but tens of thousands of dollars to get that license, sub-license. And we only had 18 months that we could sell.
Yeah.
We did like 1.2 or 1.5 million dollars in sales in those 18 months.
Yeah.
It was like great. Of course, Marianne's like, oh, I knew I believed in you. And the rest of the guys are like, I don't know. We're shocked, Kev. We're happy.
Well,
but so it was sort of a gamble, but I knew my market. I knew the market was there. I knew they were not just hungry for it, they were starving for it.
What's an interesting at least in the area I grew up. It's interesting how much of a sea change the offering of those videotapes were. I'm originally from northern Minnesota, and I remember when Collector's Connection, which was the big comic and role playing and early days of more involved board games, were the place to go if you were in the Duluth, Minnesota area, or literally the northeastern part of the state, practically, if you wanted that. And suddenly the Robotech DVDs from Palladium Games showed up there, and it was this tiny little shelf behind the counter. And within the span of a year, it moved from that to a glass case, and they were carrying Captain Harlock and Star Blazers and all of these others. And like, my grandparents lived in the Twin Cities. I'd go down to the Twin Cities and I'd go to these gaming shops down there that had been comics and games, and that was pretty much it. Maybe they had some novels that were directly related. But suddenly they had these DVD sections with the title Japanimation across the top. And that kind of changed the game store market in a lot of ways.
Oh, it really was. And I don't know how much credit we should take for that. I mean, in that 18-month period, we really did open a lot of doors for that whole market. And, I was talking about Capital City. Capital City had, on their list, we would be like 8 out of the top 10. Our videotapes would be part of the, dominate those boards. And when our license ended, of course, we tried to get it back. But Carl Masek was the guy who went on to do laser discs and other stuff with it. Not a very good quality, sadly. And I was very disappointed in those because, of course, I bought those too. And we just couldn't outbid Carl. Plus, Harmony Gold had a soft spot for him.
Yeah.
So we would have had to like double or triple what Carl was paying. And then it was, at this point now, we're talking, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And we just, and Carl could also get them into syndication, or at least that's what he had promised them. And I think he did get them into limited syndication again in the 90s. But so we couldn't match that. So we couldn't keep the license, which was a real shame because we had a guy reach out to us, actually 2 guys, they were partners, and they finally had seen our VHS tapes, and they were like, Kevin, we can get them mass produced even cheaper, and we'll maintain the quality, and we'll have to make them available at like $9.99, but we're going to get them into Walmart.
Oh.
And we're talking about selling, like, we think we're going to sell like a couple 100,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if only had reached out like 45 days earlier, our license had ended.
Yeah.
And we were in the sell-off period. And we couldn't do it. And I pointed them to Carl, but they had issues with Carl. And so it never happened. And that was a real shame. And again, who knows what that would have done? I mean, you talk about changing the face of markets and history. I mean, how big would a Palladium gotten? Would we have gotten into the anime market? Maybe, because the Capital City people reached out to us and said, "Okay, the license for Robotech is gone, but what are you doing next?"
Right.
In anime, and I'm like, nothing.
Yeah, it's anime.
We're a game company. I don't know how to dub or edit or anything. This was like already all done. All we had to do is select episodes, carve them out of those masters, put them on a VHS tape. And we didn't even do that. I mean, it was MediaTek.
If only you could have somehow added the mechanoids to the conglomeration that Robotech became.
Yeah.
So, it was exciting and it was fabulous. And at this point in time, bear in mind, we have the Ninja Turtle license. We have the Robotech license. In a few years, we're going to get Macross 2. These tapes are coming out in 89 and 1990. What comes out in 1990? Rifts.
Yeah.
We had 3 of the hottest games on the freaking market. I mean, we were just blazing hot.
Yeah.
So very exciting times, the 80s and
Yeah.
through the 90s, really. Yeah, it was crazy. It was just crazy. And it was funny because everyone thought I had lost my marbles when I got that license.
It's got to be hard because it's definitely a genre jump. You know, it's like when you start to experience success in one thing, there are people who think that what is it called, Dunning-Kruger syndrome?
Yeah,
where it transfers to all.
Yeah,
but I mean, some of that is like work ethic and knowledge and how you approach people. So.
And it's weird because I'm thinking about the mom and pop, because like you're talking 89, 90, early days of Blockbuster.
My first Robotech experience, I swear to God, we kept the little local video store. I kept, my money went there to rent the Robotech tapes and Harlock, the Space Pirate, and Star Blazers and all of that, you know?
The mom and pop, the mom and pop VHS tape rental operation next to the grocery store in the quote-unquote small town I lived in, or outside of, had actually ended up buying like 3 or 4 complete sets of the Robotech tapes.
Nice.
Because they would have people come in and they were looking for the next tape in sequence, but there were so many people that were renting them. And let me tell you, I later in life got to know the owners a little bit better, and they said, the Robotech series, we made more money off of late fees off of that series than anything other than that. Prior to that, it had been E.T. Yeah. And then they made, they actually created a separate sticker for those VHS tapes, which is, it wasn't Be Kind Rewind. It was, there is a $1 rewind fee for these because people would come in and like grab armloads of these tapes and walk to the counter and rent them, and then they'd come back not rewound, and so they'd be sitting there with the rewinder going.
No, it was great, and they were hot, and it was one of the first big animes.
Yeah.
And people loved it, and we sold like we sold like 20 or 30,000 copies of Sentinels.
That's amazing.
And I think we sold between 10 and 25,000 of most of the other tapes. And there's like, if I recall correctly, there were 8 tapes in each series: Southern Cross and New Generation.
It was usually 3 episodes a tape. So
yeah. So, it's just people were going wild over it and were loving it. And that was cool. And it was fun to be part of that. Plus, the RPGs and the source books are selling like mad. And
then the books started coming out as well, the Jack McKinley books.
Those novels were huge. People love those things.
The holidays at my house, my dad was, the normal Christmas celebrator, and my mom was Jewish. So the tradition was I'd get a series of books to read because you get the, all the days of Hanukkah and then Christmas. So it was I got all the first 6 books, and then the Masters, and then I was reading them because they're small books. I'm a speed reader. So I was reading them one each day, and the next one would come. Next one would come. And I want to ask, when you got to Masters, when they're doing Masters, did back and forth, did you have any, because you're not the only one to poo-poo Masters. Like it's by far the least favorite.
Southern Cross.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. I tried. Whenever I've watched Robotech, I've watched the Macross Saga so many times.
So good.
I've memorized it.
Yeah.
And then I get to Southern Cross and I'm like,
it's hard.
God.
It's my question is though, the books are good.
Yeah.
They're not the best, but they're good, solid books. The Southern Cross series. Were you still collaborating back and forth with them during that? And
so with McKinney's or Harmony Gold, or
with the authors of the books.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, we finally got to meet them at a convention, and I got a couple of my novels signed by them. And yeah, they're nice guys. At some point, they started to get past where we were at.
Yeah.
But yeah, they still always referenced our stuff, and I never really like consulted with them. It's not like they called me up and said, "Hey, Kev, is this an autocannon?"
Right.
It wasn't that kind of thing. But they referenced our books all the time. They loved the art. And it had an impact on their novels.
Yeah.
And as far as Harmony Gold, so one of the problems, like with Southern Cross, it's one of the books that fans these days, when they see it, they'll look at and go, "Well, this is all wrong," and they're absolutely right, because Carl Masick had run off to do something else, and what he did with that series was genius. I mean, I guess technically Woody Allen kind of did it first when he dubbed that one Asian movie.
Tiger Lily.
Yeah. So, but so the problem that Harmony Gold had was they were buying these different shows from outside the United States and re-releasing them in syndication or direct to video, and they wanted to just sell Macross as Robotech. And they couldn't do it because back then, to syndicate a show, you needed like 62 episodes or more. And so what they did is they said, well, what else do we have that we can kind of tie together and make it one big series? And in a way, it made Robotech very cool because it really distinguished it from the original Japanese Macross. And it made it more epic because you have three generations of characters in this history on Earth, and it made it very cool. But yeah, I just, so when we did Southern Cross, Carla was gone, and at this point, the Harmony Gold people trust us completely. So they said, just because I would call up and say, "Gee, we got these cool mecha designs and vehicles and stuff, but we have no in body armor or robots. We have no idea what it is. Harmony Gold has no idea what it is." I assume Carl probably did, but he wasn't there. So I said, "Can we just extrapolate onto history and create, the EBSIS, the Eastern Bloc, so whatever, and make it part of like the global war?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." That's when they tell me, they're like, "Well, the fans love your stuff so much. We only get positive feedback that we completely trust you, and we don't really know this stuff, so we just kind of rubber stamp it.
Yeah.
We just make sure the art looks right."
So you were given a lot of leeway.
Yeah, you can write whatever the hell you want, which on one hand was kind of good. On the other hand, we really wanted to present the actual material. So I was really happy we got to redo Southern Cross later in the 2000s, which is completely accurate and reflects the reality of the series. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
But fun. We were having a blast.
So you weren't given like it was basically your own research, and this is some art, this is what these things are. Was there, when you started, was there this overarching idea of, well, this is how we're going to tie these three disparate properties together through the use of protoculture and the masters bridging the gap between the Invid and the Centrati, and like that was that made clear, or was that something like you had helped develop, or where did all this?
That was already all done. That was all Carl Masick.
Okay.
It was completely done. We just took what they had aired, and then they were good with sending us all kinds of model sheets. I mean, photocopies of model sheets that they had, photocopies of photocopies. But I mean, we had big wads of stuff.
Yeah.
Same thing with Sentinels. It's like, wow, this is really cool. I'm into animation big time. In fact, I used to collect animation, and I just always loved it. All kinds of animation, whether it's the Fleischer brothers and Popeye and Superman from the 40s, 50s, or whether it's Warner Brothers or Disney. I mean, I loved all that shit. I just ate it all up as a kid and as an adult. So it was really cool to see the model sheet drawings And a lot of times we could, from the model sheets, we could do different poses, and we had more detail that the average person didn't necessarily see.
Yeah.
So Kevin Long and our other artists were able to really extrapolate on things and get it right.
I would say they did. Yeah, I would say they absolutely did. I have the Matchbox SDF one, and I was hoping that it was this, but it's not. So.
No.
It shows the back of the original role-playing game book.
So in some of the source books for the Robotech line, I'm thinking Zentradi Outbreak, Return of the Masters, a couple others. You did some great work playing at the margins of the existing story.
Yeah.
How much guidance did you get on that? Because
tonally it was right.
Tonally it's right on. Were you working with notes that had been pre-written, or was that just out of your head?
That was completely out of our head.
Oh man,
that's fantastic.
But you got to realize, all of us, me, Long, Alex, Rick Burke, all of my kids, Marianne, we were all immersed in Robotech. We loved it that much. And so I always say there are only 3 reasons to get a license. And any one of these reasons is good enough to get a license. But when you're lucky enough that all 3 apply, it's just a thing of beauty. And one is you love the IP and you just want to do it. The other is going to make you a truckload of money, or at least the theory is it's going to make you a truckload of money. And 3 is it's going to open up doors for you. And in the case of both Ninja Turtles and Robotech, it was all 3. So these were passion projects. It's not, I've talked to a lot of other people who have different companies, and it's funny, a lot of times everyone says, oh, I love this IP, whatever it is that they just licensed. And the reality is they like it. They think they're going to make money from it. And that's why they got the license. And they don't really understand the fan base. They're really not truly a fan themselves. They truly don't know it and love it. We were fanatics. We're reading the flipping novels. We're reading every piece of Japanese literature that comes across in our part of the world. We're buying this stuff. Doesn't matter how much it cost. I had tons of the toys, the Robotech toys. I'm not talking, I bought a bunch of the Matchbox too. I bought every Matchbox toy. But I had a dozen of the different Japanese figures. Still have the Japanese release edition of the SDF one. I've got all kinds of great stuff. I've sold some of it over the years. Some of it's gotten lost, some of it got smashed up. But I loved this stuff. So I had every Veritech. I had every suit of power armor from New Generation. Because I loved the freaking Cyclones. I had every one of those.
Cyclones are the best.
We were into it. And plus we felt like, man, we're on the inside track. We're doing the videos. We see these model sheets. At the time I was I was a Robotech expert. The only person who probably knew more about it was Carl Masek and, a few thousand Psycho fans, because they're out there, right? And I met a bunch of them. But I was one of those Psycho fans. And so was Alex, and so was Kevin Long. So it was a passion project that we really, really loved. We really knew what the fans wanted. We knew what the tone of Robotech was, what it needed to be, and we just ran with it. Like I said, they gave us really a just complete whatever you want, as long as it makes sense, as long as it doesn't disparage or hurt the IP. Go with it. We trust you, which was huge. And that was exciting and inspiring as well, that this company trusts us so much with their IP. We would have kept doing it forever, except in the 1990s, they were coming out. Most people don't even remember it, but there was talk of doing a Robotech 3000.
Mhm.
And as companies do sometimes, and I never understand this decision because you see it here and there happening. When they were going to release Robotech 3000, which was horrific, that's why it never came out, by the way. Somebody realized,
No.
yeah, exactly. But at the time, the person handling the license said, you not only can you no longer create stuff for the original Macross and Sentinels. Well, Sentinels wasn't out yet. I think that came after
Mhm.
Robotech 3000. That was sort of their, or maybe I'm thinking of Shadow Chronicles.
Shadow Chronicles, yeah.
But anyways, we not only could we not do more books for the series, they wanted us to discontinue all these books and only do Robotech 3000.
Yeah. Yep.
And as a fan, I knew my fellow fans were going to hate that, and the backlash would be tremendous. And so I said, I'm not going to renew our license. I can't do that. And I begged them to let us at least keep publishing the old books. And they're like, nope. All the new stuff is going to be Robotech 3000. We don't want people looking back.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. I mean, on one side, I get it, where so many creative corporations view things like the role-playing game and other media as advertising for their core product, so they want it to reflect whatever they feel their core product is. And it does backfire, especially when your core product, such as Robotech 3000, which I've never seen even a cell of, but you are not the first person to tell me it's a travesty. I get that part, but at the same time, as a consumer, I still want to introduce, as a game master, I want to introduce people to this stuff, and I want them to be able to go out and get the stuff that's still in print. And so, yeah, it's not the first time that's happened. I mean, there's also the flip side, where when companies are coming out with like a reboot or the next version, and they do that, pull back all of the IP rights so they can license them back out for even more money and stuff. You know, it's a danger of the business.
I get it, and I understand. You know, my philosophy is always, when it comes to licensing, is ultimately we work for the licensor. We may be creating this stuff for ourselves and the fans, our fellow fans, but the licensor has, you know, whether we agree with their decisions or not, they have the final word. They have to. It makes total sense. And, you know, we agree to that. And so in this case, we couldn't abide by their decision. I knew it was a bad one. So I let the license go rather than help promote what I thought would be something horrific. So
it's got to be hard, especially when, you know, you are a part of the IP success, to watch it go essentially off the rails.
Yeah.
And just be like, that's got to be a hard moment to be, okay, and this is where we step back. You know, we can't guide this anymore. We can't put our imprint on it. Yeah.
Right.
That's got to be hard. But that's
hard.
It's a very wise choice too, to have that moment of disconnect and not write it down into ruin.
Well, one of the weird things about us, I always think it's kind of crazy, because we get so excited about the stuff we produce, and it seems crazy, but I often say, of course we got this right, or of course we did this or that. We're fans of it, and it's like, but so you're fans of riffs? Yeah. Didn't you create riffs? Yeah. So you're a fan of your own work? I mean, it sounds egotistical or silly, but yeah, we are. We love it. That's why we know what our audience is going to want, and I think that's a good thing. And again, it gets back to a lot of businesses get very corporate. That's why it's been fun working with. It's fun working with Harmony Gold up until that point. It's been fun working with Paramount, and I keep saying this because I find it very unusual for a megacorp like Paramount to really, truly understand and care about their fans
Yeah.
and about the original creators. There's been time and time again where they've looked at something, they're like, as we put together the TMNT and Other Strangeness Redux edition, there have been times where they look at it and go, I don't know, maybe you're going too far with the color work. We're not sure it honors Eastman and Laird, their original work, and we have some concerns. And thankfully, they usually defer to Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird.
Mm-hmm.
So, we because we were crushed because they were wondering about some of the color work. It was because it's more painterly, and it was taking out a lot of the duo shade cross hatching to put in actual color and shadow and shading, and which made it very dynamic. And we wanted that more painterly look. That's sort of what Palladium is known for. And they were like, I'm not so sure about this. And they said, we want to see what Kevin Eastman has to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a Zoom call and we show it to Kev. And thank God Kevin Eastman looked at it and went, wow, I think this might be some of the best color work I've ever seen on our stuff.
Wow.
And Paramount never said a word after that. It was like, yeah, ooh. I'm like, oh, thank God. we had already had the color artist, our local color artist. We already had him working on that for like 4 months. And I promised them we'd pay him no matter what, whether they rejected it or not. But I was sure they would love it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh. But things worked out fine. I didn't mean to digress into turtles. It just
by all means.
No.
Licensing and IPs.
I've always kind of seen this, and this is your baby, but I've always seen this as it's a loose history, but at the same time, it's take us where the interconnections are. We're here to learn about how it all goes together, and there's a lot of curiosity out there from our audience that want to know all these little incidentals. So please don't feel bad. Go ahead.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Kevin, one question that people keep popping up in our Discord and in just regular private conversation is, can you hook us up on the secret caches that are hidden here and there of any remaining Robotech books?
Sorry, guys.
Dang.
So, I mean, that is something we because I was a comic book collector, I had a sense of the collectability and a sense of history. So we did save books as they came out. Sometimes not as carefully as others, like Beyond the Supernatural blew out. And I'm like, hey, okay, how many Beyond the Supernaturals do we have? The first printing. And they're like, nothing.
I need one for my shelf, though.
You didn't put aside a box? Nope. So, I mean, I do have copies of most things. Now, again, sometimes things will slip through. So, like for the show, like I've got a pile of the books to jog my memory on stuff. And so I was kind of surprised when I went into my archives and saw I've got like 6 or 8 copies of the RDF manual and Zentradi source book and Southern Cross. And then there are certain books like the Robotech New World Order and Zentradi
I have that
Breakout.
one.
I've got like 2-3 copies of Zentradi Breakout. That's it in the whole building. Same thing of New World Order. Lancer's Rockers, for years, we only had like 2 copies. And then fans over the years would find one someplace and it's like, I bought this for $5. You can have it. And I'm like, oh, thank you. That's very nice.
So I got a question. This came from our Discord, actually. The new Robotech Visual Archive appears to have some of the art that you all developed for the books in it. Was when you gave up the IP license, did the art transfer back to Harmony Gold? Are what we seeing there actual Palladium pieces that got moved into the Robotech Visual Archive? How did that come about?
Yeah, I'm not aware of those digital archives, but I imagine yes. So a typical license is that the licensor, because it's a derivative work, we're starting to get a little technical and copyright legal. So anything
I'm here for it.
that is anything that's based on someone else's IP, intellectual property, like Robotech or Turtles, belongs to them, the people who created it and created the original stuff. And if they license it to you or someone else, anything you create is called a derivative work because it's based on, inspired by, and based on, not just more than inspired by, it's based on that original work. You're using their characters, Rick Hunter, Britai, et cetera, the Valkyries and the Veritex and the Destroids and all that. Those are all things they created that you're extrapolating upon, even if you're creating a new Destroid or a new Veritech fighter, or you create a new character. It's all built in their world. It's a derivative work, so they own it. So anything we have created for Harmony Gold or Ninja Turtles belongs to the IP holder, whether it's the original people or original company, or whether it's someone else who has acquired that IP. Like right now, if we did Robotech stuff, I believe the Sony company owns Robotech nowadays.
Yeah.
So we've never worked with Sony, but if we were, even if we're reprinting old Robotech books or creating new Robotech material, all that work belongs to the IP holder. In this case, it'd be Sony. And, you have to know that going in. And that's one of the things that makes licensing a little tricky, because especially for companies and people like us, because we're so into it, we put our hearts and souls into it.
Yeah. And
it's something that ultimately we don't own. So they could take our new mecha designs or Dr. Richard Burke and put him in a movie, make a toy action figure of him, and we don't see a penny. We don't even, thanks to, Kevin Siembieda or Palladium, none of that. It's all theirs, and they can do whatever the hell they want to do with it. It's that going in. And in some ways that sucks a little bit, but that's the way licenses work. I mean, if you license our IP, we own the art and the writing. Like with Pinnacle, we have a licensing deal with them for Riffs, and they're doing a wonderful job with that setting and IP. But ultimately, Palladium Books owns that text, not their rules. That's always a carve out, and it is made clear. Or if it's a video game, it's not their engine. But everything else that they create belongs to the intellectual property creator or owner. So, but it's also kind of technically, I think they could use our art and characters at any time, but typically that doesn't happen until after the license ends, just so you're not creating confusion and interfering with your licensee's sales. Yeah. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they got our stuff up there. That's cool. I mean, the art's great. I want the world to see it, and it belongs to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had more of an observation than anything else. Let's go back to 15-year-old Matthew, who was...
Did he have a beard?
Sadly, yeah, he did. I come from a long line of Yetis. We are furry North folk. We used every piece of art. We used the concepts of rolling dice, but this didn't contain rules per se, like the combat system. It was referenced to, I believe there's a brief blurb in here that says, and combat is resolved as it would be in the Palladium role-playing game. And we had all these tables, and we just kind of winged it, which was fine because we're 15 playing around the cafeteria with, dice we smuggled in. But I think that did it ever come out in any of the books of the this is how you run it through? I know you have in later books.
Shadow Chronicles, definitely.
Yeah, Shadow Chronicles did, but
I've used that one.
But we took wild licenses with your rules, sir, as children.
Well, I mean, it had very streamlined, basic information, but you didn't need it. It was a pretty straightforward game. My philosophy has always been, if you're having fun, you're doing it right.
Well, we did it right then. We we did it right for years. In fact, right up until the time Rifts came out, we were playing this solidly. And then all our Veritechs and Cyclones went to Rifts.
Yep. Your next session opens up, the GM's like, and a big portal opens up in front of you. And from now on, you're playing Rifts.
Well,
I mean, I think we played Robotech and Palladium Fantasy Fantasy we played for decades. But I think before Robotech came out, obviously we were playtesting it. And I think we played Robotech pretty straight for about 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a great game. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's fast. Yeah, I mean, you feel like you know it if you're a fan of the show, of the anime. So, it's easy to get into that world and just rock and roll.
It really is too. And like, there's lots of giant robot games out there. I own them all. I speak from experience. But there's no other games where I'm using all my Veritech weapon skills to spin wildly around like Max Sterling, blowing clouds of mini missiles out of the sky.
Honestly,
dude, this is a great game.
The missile combat in Rifts never made sense to me, Matthew, until you explained it's Robotech. And then suddenly, I understood everything. It's like, oh, that's how it works.
Yeah.
You're right. Absolutely.
Yep.
Oh, there's a lot that I really want to go on, but it's so nitpicky.
No, go ahead.
So you have, I'm not going to say rabid fan base because that's unkind to true believers like myself who are fair-minded and even-handed individuals, one and all.
In all aspects of life, Matthew.
In all aspects of life,
The lie detector is going off.
I have to say our greatest quality is our modesty. But
that's why I unplugged the lie detector.
Where was I going with this? When you do things like your playtesting, is that done in-house, or do you have a group of usual suspects that you go to? Or is it just, all right, kids, gather around, this is what we're doing?
It kind of depends on the product and circumstance. When we were doing Robotech, I had a group of usual suspects. We had the Detroit Gaming Center. I'd helped Eric Wojcik found the Detroit Gaming Center along with 6-8 other people. And so we had that resource. And, I used to run a group of 26 people. So whenever I was playtesting, I could grab a half a dozen or a dozen of those folks at almost any given time, plus lots of other people that I was acquainted with through the gaming center. So playtesting is tricky because you need to playtest. And I think if you're playing with the usual suspects, provided they're going to give you honest feedback, that's what you really need.
Yeah.
One of the things I've seen from other companies, and I've witnessed myself, is when we send it out to, and this is no offense to you guys or anyone else out there, when you send it out, and I've seen this happen with other companies, you send out your stuff to fanboys that look at you as, above and beyond Joe Average. And they're just so honored that you're letting them play test your game.
They don't want to say anything mean.
Or they don't even see it. Because they're just so excited to be part of it. And they're going to have fun with it because it's going to be good. And then, I think some of them, they're just so caught up in excitement. This is great. And that's good. But we need the people who are going to look at it realistically and say, I had a great time, but I think this slowed the game down. I think this is confusing.
Yeah.
I think this is, too powerful or too weak. You need that honest feedback. And so if you're playing with people who are your friends but don't revere you,
Right.
Right.
you know, and you know, you come on, you know how friends are. They'll give you a lot of shit and jerk your chain. So you need those guys who are going to look at it realistically and give you honest and open feedback.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes the fans just can't articulate what that is. They're not game designers.
Yeah.
So they might tell you something vague like, I just don't think this works as well. And, you know, and other gamers, other fans are like, you know, they're rules lawyers and engineers, and they're going to tear your shit apart. But
Yeah.
again, what is their orientation? How are they looking at this? Are they looking at it the same way you are?
Yeah.
Because then it comes into, okay, so-and-so brought this up. Is he right? Or is it just he's that quirky guy?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, 1 out of 10,000 people are going to have a problem with this, but everyone else is going to love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because, you know, role playing is very personal.
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about Robotech, and all you guys, I'm sure, while we're all playing the same basic characters in that world, our old games were a little different. The way we role played were a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have our biases over the types of games we like to play. Hell, Eric Woodjick and I were as close as you can get. We were closer than brothers, and Eric role played very differently than I role play. He was very much into puzzles and strategy, and he used to make his players, you know, like if there was a dungeon crawl, if you didn't draw the map during that game session, when you came back and said, I'm going to the door over here, and he'd be like, are you?
Describe it
Did
to
you
me.
draw a map? Do you know where that is? Do you remember where that is?
Mm.
And, you know, for me, it's like, if you've been there and you said you drew a map, I don't give a shit. Yes, you go right there. You know, Eric, we used to marvel because Eric used to be a lot into secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And in his mind, it was like suspense and whatnot. And he would watch me game, and he's like, I don't understand. He goes, you give them so much information before a big battle. Like they know, at least generally, if not specifically, the level of the big bad guys they're going up against.
Mm-hmm.
They know he holds the sword of whatever, and it's a magic rune weapon that can do X, Y, and Z. And he's like, and yet they still have these fabulous, exciting games, but they know everything. And I'm like, Eric, don't you understand? It's like going up against Dr. Doom or the Green Goblin. You know exactly what you're going up against, but that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's where the suspense is, because it's like, oh my God, can we take on Dr. Doom or Galactus or whatever analogy you want to use, whatever comic book villain or movie villain, Darth Vader? You know, you shit a brick when you think, oh my God, my character's our group's got to go up against Darth Vader.
Right.
And a bunch of stormtroopers. Darth Vader? And that's what happens when you have the proper build-up, like I would set these guys up. It's not like, oh, guess what? You're going up against this. And they had to do the research. If they didn't research nothing, they walk into a death trap.
Yeah.
But, you know, these guys are like, okay, I'm going to check out this. I'm going through the Thieves Guild to see if I can, you know, ferret out whatever information. We know where this one guy hangs out, right? I'm going to spy on him. You know, I mean, they went through all this stuff, and it was hilarious because, I mean, they would like work themselves up.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, yeah, we're so terrified to go up against these guys, but I think we're ready, Kev. And it's like, okay, let's roll.
Oh,
And it's just a totally different approaches, and they both worked.
Mm-hmm.
Because a good game master can make anything work. I knew this guy who was renowned at the gaming center for running some of the best adventures in the whole building. And at some point I said, hey, you know, I noticed you're always using these source books. And he could take like the worst piece of crap that someone published and turn it into a masterpiece when he played it. Because he would embellish and all this stuff. But he never created anything from the top of his head. He never created something on his own. And I asked him one day, why was that? And he goes, I can't do it. And I go, what do you mean you can't do it? He goes, I need that germ of an idea. I need the little basics from which I build upon and take to new heights. But I can't. And if he could do that, he really could. But he didn't have, for some reason, he didn't have that confidence. Because if you can take a piece of garbage and turn it into, something magnificent, you can create anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talented. You're an outstanding game master. But he felt he couldn't. He needed that something to get him going. So everyone has their little strengths and weaknesses and their own idiosyncrasies that work for them and against them. And that's what makes it personal. Some people like, to play more of a film noir version of Robotech or fantasy or whatever the heck. Some really want that, like Eric. It's a puzzles and secrets. Others are straight out combat. Some people play just power games. And you hear a lot of, gamers with poo-poo power gamers. And while I'm not a power gamer and it's not my cup of tea, I have no problem with power gamers. Because again, if you're playing my stuff and that's the kind of game you want to play and you and your players are having the time of your life, awesome.
Yeah.
And some of that comes with time and experience. I had a guy who reached out to me, a fan who came to visit our office, and we're chit-chatting, and he's like, when I was young, I didn't get a lot of this stuff, and we were just into power and treasure, and he was a big Risk player, and he's like, yeah, we played, I think they were a Glitterbois squad, and it was like, we just blew the snot out of everything, right? And he's like, but it's weird, I game now, and it's like, I see all the nuances and the political intrigue, and, I'm playing a rogue scholar, and it's like, yeah, your viewpoint changes and your experience changes. And these guys went from power gamers to, more finesse storytellers.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's fine. But I don't give a shit if you're a power gamer and you're blowing everything up. If you're having fun, yay.
Yeah.
Have fun. Keep at it.
In many ways, one of the Palladium Robotech series' big strengths, because there are a lot of options to approach the game fundamentally differently. Now, part of that comes from the source material, because you go from, the Macross saga, which is relatively slightly more straightforward military, but with this huge survival element. And then you go to Southern Cross, and suddenly both the series and the books allow for more of the politics to come out. Because, go ahead.
But this is, again, we don't even have to cross series here. We go back to just the Macross saga. You've got Roy Fokker.
Yep.
You've got Lin Min Mei.
Yeah.
Like complete opposite ends of the power spectrum here, but they are both equally important to the story.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, the argument can be made that Min Mei was far more important than Fokker.
God, yeah. She was OP.
Yeah.
That's we've said it on this show so many times, and it's one of the things that you do and your show does incredibly well. On your show, your books, and that is to put the communications specialist in this book,
yes,
right after the Veritech pilot, and to make it playable and not be just, all right, well, there's a new guy and we need the healer, so I guess that's you, man.
Yeah,
like it is something about the way you do your games will put the vagabond next to the baby dragon, and they both have such an amazing time. And I don't know how it works out, but it always works out. And it's part of the magic of Palladium games.
I think part of it is, for me, I love the role-playing aspect.
Yeah.
Because no other game really offers that. No matter how much close a video game gets or a board game gets with role-playing elements, nothing beats actual role-playing. And to me, it's all about character and story. So when I design these characters, I try to make each one unique and interesting in their own right and fun to play. Now, it puts a little bit more on the game master because, and that's where you hear sometimes people say, oh, well, your game doesn't work because it's not balanced. Well, yeah, you throw a guy in a Veritech or a Glitterbois and that communication guy out in the middle of a battlefield where they're fighting giant mechs, and your communication guys dressed in light armor with 50 MDC. Yeah, he's dead meat walking. Although again, a good game master would try to give him a way where I can hide behind this, or can I leap on the back of my partner's Veritech and be shielded by whatever, and then can I block the transmissions, or
there
can
it
I
is.
see where
Send the enemy to the wrong space.
And it's like you got to give them opportunity. But yeah, if you just throw them out in the middle of an empty field with a bunch of tanks, or walking tanks in the case of Destroids and Veritechs, yeah, the guy's going to get stomped or blasted or blown to smithereens. Yeah. And that's irresponsible for the game master. But if you've got a player who wants to play a more nuanced, finessed character, that's awesome. And here that character is, whether he's the rogue scholar or he's the communication officer or the medic or whatever. They all have a role to play, just like in the real frickin' world.
Yeah.
It always kills me when you hear about, well, all the characters should be equal.
No.
It's like, well, in the real world, it doesn't work that way. I mean, Matt, you look like you're a bulky, muscular guy. You could kick the snot out of me. Is that unfair? Can I say, well, Matt?
I don't know. I've never taken boxing or athletics. So.
We're not. We're equally valuable. We're important as people, but we're not equals. We're going to have strengths and weaknesses. I would dare say, and I don't know what your background is, so maybe you'll say, ha, Kev, I could kick your ass in this too. But, if we sat down to draw a picture,
I think you'd win.
I would tend to believe that I'm going to outdraw the snot out of you.
You're going to smoke all three people at this table.
Yeah, I don't. The NPC does not draw.
We actually look for your stuff when we go through your books, and we've gone through a lot of your books. And we're like, he did that one.
It's Kevin Peace.
Yeah.
I've, over the years, been involved in a lot of conversations, and I think some of the most early ones were in probably Robotech.
Yeah.
Possibly a little in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but the ones that I do remember were in Robotech regarding balance and how the classes and OCCs and stuff weren't balanced. And one of the things I've always gone back to, and it's really good to hear you basically supporting the argument I've always made, that balance happens at the table.
Yeah.
And that's where balance needs to happen. Balance doesn't necessarily need to be written into the rules on the page.
When people talk about balance, they mean combat.
Yeah.
As if combat's the only part of the game.
Right.
Right.
And when they talk about combat, it's always even more so the most basic forms of combat, the ability to smash face in some direct way during the turn, as it were. And it's great to hear you articulate that, because one, it means I've been defending my point in line with your thinking, so that's good. And two, I mean, it's just true.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
well, it's very true. So last Sunday, I play tested through one of the adventures that's appearing in Yinsloth Expeditions for Palladium Fantasy, and I'm still oriented because I always play with large groups. I mean, for me, a small group is 8 people. And I'm used to running a lot of my games these days at conventions or special events. So inevitably, there's 100 people who want to play in my game, and I can only accommodate so many. But that also means I'm probably running 14 or 16, maybe even 18 people. So I tend to think big. And when I'm writing these adventures, I always have to tone myself down, because the typical game group, as we all know, is 3 to 6 people. And for this playtest, It was Sean, his 14-year-old daughter, and his brother Caleb, who's our warehouse guy. And there's a big bad in this game. And I thought, oh man, these guys are in trouble. I'm going to have to really scale back this adventure because they all decided to roll up characters special for the adventure. So they're all first level. They also decided to go with whatever the dice rolled were. So, like, the tough guy, let me rephrase that. The strong guy in the group was a dwarven druid played by Sean's daughter. And yes, she had a strength of 24, but all of her other attributes are all basically average. They all three of them happen to have reasonably high IQs, like 14 to 16. But other than that, and it seemed like all of them had one other attribute, except for Sean, that was kind of high. Like Caleb's character, his character had a 17 speed, which came in really handy, by the way. And I thought, oh shit, these guys, what am I going to do here? And part of it, because they're going on this big adventure, so the people who are hiring will give them some minor magic items and upgrade their armor a little bit. But there's still all these first level characters. And even though Sean's character was a man catcher / bounty hunter, through skill, through clever and cunning selection of skills, he got his PS, his physical strength, up to 9. and then Caleb's character. So we have a man catcher, a frickin' druid, and a thief going up against an ancient evil that, unless they stop him, is on the verge of becoming godlike. And I'm like, oh, let's see how this goes. So they played smart.
Yep.
They played as a team. They had a plan. They stuck to the plan. They were strategic. They kicked ass. I mean, there's this one, and this is also why I love role playing. There was this one role where Sean, he doesn't have a lot. Like, they don't have any, they have no rune weapons. They don't have anything that's really kick ass. And so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin the adventure for people who play it. But
and we all know that Sean is listening in, trying to score any hints on the future.
Sean makes this decision, and it's a good one. It's smart, and I understand where it's coming from. And I'm like, it's great, but it'll never work on this particular villain. It just won't work. It's this guy. In fact, I can show the character off.
Ooh, oh, we're getting Kevin art. Ooh.
So
damn.
So it's got like these shadowy tentacles that are growing out of them, and I'm like, this will never work because this guy's got tentacles. You'd have to roll like a 19 or a 20 for this to have any prayer of working. Sean rolls a natural 20. The whole table is like, yeah! And because I'm like, and they're like, does it work? And I'm like, natural 20, of course it works. Yeah. Well, I said, wait, if he, the big bad, rolls a natural 20, no. Or even if he rolls higher than a 20 with bonuses, but he didn't, it worked. They're like, and then they just played smart.
Yeah.
After that, and the dwarf never. That's not true. She had to fight a couple of goblins. I was about to say she never even drew her weapon, but towards the end, to rescue a bunch of children. And it was just basic, simple combat. And again, she played smart. It was funny because she went against Daddy's idea because she's like, I'm going to sneak ahead and see if I can find the kids because I can hear. You said I could hear them like soft crying off in the distance, and I'm like, yeah. And Sean's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. We should stay and fight as a team. And she's like, she looks at me, and I go, you can do whatever you want. Your character can do whatever you want. And she's like, I'm going to sneak ahead. And Sean just kind of frowns, But it worked out great. She rescued the kids. He and Caleb were able to defeat the big bad and a couple of his minions. There was at the end of this adventure, which is difficult. they had the best possible outcome. So good that they went from first level to second level.
Oh wow! In one,
because they basically saved the Orcish Empire and possibly the world if this thing had gotten more powerful and had slain the children and become this godlike thing. And it's like they were heaped with rewards, and I jumped them from first level to second level because they played so awesomely. And it was just this great adventure. And I didn't have to change a thing.
Nice.
Because they played smart as a team. They played in character. Poor Caleb's character had this big decision to make. And as a thief and with the background of his character, it was like a big decision. And I love seeing his mind turning as the player. What would my character do? Oh my gosh. Would he take this deal? Because now he could get the revenge he seeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just great. It was just, I love role-playing games.
I always find that you get those moments more when you do have characters like, not to poo-poo the Glitterbois, because, the Glitterbois, but when you have a position that's more than point thing at and destroy, when you have positions that have to think, how do I fit myself into this situation? How do I make myself valuable? How do I make my team do better?
Right. How do I use the strengths that I do have in this scary, difficult, what would normally be a heavily combat situation, but couldn't be because of the nature of those characters?
It encourages not only problem solving in your personal life, but it encourages looking at things in different angles. When, don't get me wrong, I do love going in guns blazing, I really do, but I also love being the communication specialist. And well, here's the thing, guys, they're showing up on this battlefield, but we've been checking their transmissions for the last 3 weeks, and what if we just slipped a different location to them as a late-minute order, and they don't show up at all. We grab what we need and we leave.
And honestly, that's one of the good things about the Robotech series, because even going back to the source material, the standard player character party, unless you're doing something where you're playing like an all Zentradi game during the Macross Saga, or an all Invid game, or something, one of those weird edge cases, oftentimes both the source material and the work that Kevin did with it, your player characters are coming from this underlying assumption that they're going up against overmatch.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe most of the Zentradi are actually unit per unit weaker than your average Veritech or whatever, but there are like 100-to-1 outmatch, you know, and things like that. And then you get to like the Invid, where most of the higher level Invid are can rip apart a Cyclone Rider with their bare hands.
You have
on
to be
any
fast.
Tuesday. And so it really drives the setting itself, plus the rules you've designed, really drive that you got to think your way through problems.
And plus the series, again, my main thing would be the original Macross series, which I know the most of all of Robotech, but they don't go from point A to point B, from combat to combat. Like every single situation is something unusual that they get through intelligence and or planning, or sometimes just dumb luck. Yeah. Like it's never like, okay, we got our 6 Veritex versus them. Okay, we're going to roll some dice. No, it's like, okay, now, well, you've got one giant armor. The rest of you are small and being carried out of his Zentradi ship. Yeah. So it's like, how do you do this?
Like, by the end of the Macross Saga, when he finally dies, spoiler alert.
A little late, but
when Admiral Goebel finally dies at the end of it.
Good death, too.
Oh, yeah. Ooh. Primo, especially in the novels. It's good in the series, great in the novels.
Yeah.
The Can you imagine how many ulcers that poor man had by the because running from basically Jupiter back to Earth with crap logistics, poor intel, all of that, and having to outthink, outplan, and occasionally just roll the dice, literally,
with an experimental spaceship that
no one knows.
That has already proven to not be reliable.
Yeah.
Where's the jump engine now?
And none of those encounters are balanced.
Yeah. It was there was a good feeling in both the books, the cartoons, and everything about how it was beyond. We are dealing with, because there's like the whole humanity fuck yeah Reddit subsection where they're like, humanity can do everything, and this is like, no, this is a lot beyond us, and we are just barely getting by. We've learned enough to almost operate some of the controls.
Well, and think about it. Whether you like the characters in any part of the Robotech saga, they're characters. You had strong characters, whether you liked them or hated them. You had strong characters, and that, again, to me, good stories is all about character and story. That's why it also would take, people would complain that it takes 30 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes to roll up a character, because I'm deliberately not having you create throwaway characters. Like in Recon, it's a different story. When Eric redesigned that, he had it so that, people are going to die like flies. So character creation is fast, quick, simple.
Yeah.
I want you to create a meaty character, because in my mind, you're going to be playing this character that you're going to love for the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
Is that why the armored cockpit's MDC is so darn high?
Well, yeah, that's exactly why.
Well, and I'm not really, even though in my early days I was accused of being a killer GM, because I wouldn't, if you did something stupid and you die, you're dead, because you're a moron.
Yeah.
I found characters only die in my games if they're heroically sacrificing themselves or they're stupid. And but if I can give them a way out, I do. So here's a great Robotech story. I'm Kevin Long is playing, and Kevin Long and some other character. They realized there was an enemy mole, basically as Andrade, that was micronized, and they figure out who he is, and the guy's trying to make his escape, and he jumps in a Jeep or some vehicle, and then they jump in a Jeep, and they're chasing him. They're going through this wild car chase. And I'm like, okay, I need you to roll under your piloting skill to make this maneuver. And Long looks at the other player, and he looks at me and goes, I don't have a piloting skill. Now, I figure he's a Veritech pilot, so he's got to have some kind of piloting skill, but not for this high-speed, crazy chase. So I said, tell you what, if you roll, I don't know, 30% or something, you got it. He rolls like a 93. They go crash, and they slam into the other vehicle, causing a crash. Their car goes careening into a building. And, in real life, they would be dead. But in real life, they're not fighting giant invading aliens who can shrink themselves.
Yeah.
So I said, so you survive, but you'll be in a body cast for the next 6 months.
Oh, no.
And, it was just, but it was one of those great moments where in the heat of the moment, I'll let him jump into that Jeep and let him drive. And then I'm like, oh, well, he should have some kind of basic knowledge. If you can drive a Veritech, you can pilot a Jeep, at least driving it down the street. But no, not a high speed chase where the guy's evasive action,
pit maneuvers.
Yeah, and I think they were trying to make some leap, like some jump with the car, and I'm like,
jumping vehicles can be hard.
Skill? What skill? And what was funny is he turns to another guy and goes, do you have piloting skill? Like they can suddenly swap places?
Yeah, it doesn't work like that, sadly.
The character didn't either.
Yeah.
So neither one could pilot ground vehicles.
Reach over and grab the wheel.
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
I think we got most anecdotally of the Discord questions done, with one exception, which I think we should use as kind of our big wrap up. I would like to revisit this with you again, Kevin. We can talk about some of the later books as things go on, as our timeline moves on. So here's the thing. The Regis has taken over Earth, as she's going to. We're all either scattered or, picking the flowers of life for her, as is our lot. And you discover not just one cache, but 3 caches. One from the SDF-1, maybe one of those armed platforms, and one from the Expeditionary Force. And you find that at an old Southern Cross base. So you have all the 3 generations of mecha available to you. And lo and behold, there's just pristine things in pristine condition. You've got a half rack of protoculture canisters tied to the back of your Jeep. What are you, Kevin Siembieda, piloting out of there?
Oh, that's a tough one. I really like Destroids, just personally. I love Destroids. I love Cyclones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one, because if I want speed and agility, it's a Cyclone.
Yeah.
If I want power, speed, and agility, it's got to be a Valkyrie.
Mm-hmm.
Man, but if I want power, what am I going up against? I want a freaking walking tank.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want a Spartan or a Tomahawk?
Oh, of course, you want the Mac 3.
Or do I want a alpha and beta combo?
Oh,
You can fit a Cyclone in a compartment of an Alpha. I'm just saying.
Can.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yep.
Oh.
So yeah, I'd have to go with one of the Veritechs, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be, especially if I could get away with an alpha and a beta.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll allow it for the purposes of the question.
Totally fair. Totally
He's a
fair.
beneficial Chia.
Yeah,
I really love the original Valkyries, man. Those are
they're beautiful. That
so cool.
that F-14 styling to them, it has the heavy shoulders of that F-14 Tomcat, where the engines are just forward.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Well, in every configuration, every mode,
Yeah,
it looks fast, tough, powerful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just no wonder that show was so popular.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
just
great design. What about you, NPC?
Me?
Yeah, same question. What?
Bzz, Cyclone. Bzz, I'm just out the door in a Cyclone. Yeah.
I'm going to take a little bit of hate for this one.
What you got? Is it a hover tank?
No. Do you remember
Love?
the space fighter, the non-transformable?
The Lancer?
The Lancer.
Yeah. It's a gun.
If it's anything, I loved the Lancer.
Mm-hmm.
If it's got to be something that's a battle mech or a Veritech or a Battloid, honestly, I have this deep love for the Mac 3 because it hits this weird sweet spot of totally impractical military industrial complex. Yep. There was bribery going on somewhere here. What are you thinking by doing a technically mobile artillery platform that goes at most 10 kilometers an hour? It's a tough one for me. I am one of the weirdos who's very pro Southern Cross, except for the animated series. I get where they're coming from, but I do like the more blocky aesthetic in a lot of ways. The
hover tank is cool.
The hover tank's cool, but the Logan has got a sweet spot for me. I gotta say, if I gotta do,
the Ajax is cool.
The Ajax is cool, but the Logan is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Are you just gonna name off like 1,000 things?
Give me one.
What do you want? What do you want? Oh god, the Gladiator.
Okay,
that's a good one.
The Gladiator. I'm gonna go with the Gladiator.
All right.
Yeah, I love the Gladiator too.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, in the Mach 3, I mean, come on. Its nickname is the Monster. You see this thing and you're like, yeah, it's the Monster.
Well, for me, it's just the original Veritech. That thing is gorgeous. And I love the alpha and the beta. And I love the way they fit together. But if you asked me for a perfect Space Knight, it would be the F-14 that turns into a perfect Space Knight. And that's just where I'm going.
If you let me dabble in Sentinels, I'm going to grab the Shadow Veritech. But no, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been fantastic.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on this one. This is, like I said at the very beginning, this changed the entire course of my young dorkdom. And the thought of that this could have been Steve Jackson, I never would have been even exposed to that. It's like mirror, big goatee Matthew moment there. Yeah, I could have been something entirely different. So
Yeah.
No, my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. Like I said, I'm a big fanboy geek myself, so it's easy. I can talk about this stuff for hours.
we love it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for wanting to do these interviews. I appreciate it.
Oh, we love it.
I think it's important because, like I've said a couple of times now, that this has shaped a lot of our earlies, and it's just, I think these stories should be out there.
Yeah, definitely. And
these are foundational role-playing game industry tales.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
And these peeks we get behind the not necessarily intentional curtain into what it takes to actually be a publisher, what it takes to be a game designer, what it takes, and the hints of what goes into licensing. I know a lot that resonates with a lot of our listeners.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's funny you said it was pivotal for you, Matt. It changed your life as a role player. If you really think about it, Robotech helped cement Palladium's place as a powerhouse in the RPG industry, because we had success with Palladium Fantasy and the earlier weapon books. We had success with Heroes Unlimited, but then we have our first mega hit with Turtles. 1 year later, we have our second mega hit with TMNT. And that's what got us into the mom and pop comic book stores, that 1-2 punch. And Palladium was just taking off like crazy with that, like a Veritech.
Yeah. That's where we leave it, is right there.
Yeah.
Palladium was taken off like a Veritech.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin, and we look forward to our next conversation. I believe we're going to follow this mega damage train to its inevitable explosion.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Glitterbois, a Palladium Books fan podcast. Glitterbois, Rifts, the Megaverse, and all other such topics are the property of Kevin Siembieda and Palladium Books. Please buy all their stuff and help keep them in print and making more games. You can order directly at palladiumbooks.com, and their entire catalog is available digitally at Drive-Thru RPG as well. Our opening music is 8-Bit Bass and Lead by Furby Guy from freesound.org. This closing music is Caravana by Philip Gross, available at freemusicarchive.org. All sound effects used are self-made or acquired via Creative Commons Zero license. If you like what you have heard, find us on Twitter and Facebook as The Glitterbois. That's BOIS. And check us out online at breakfastpuppies.com/glitterbois. And also join us on the Breakfast Puppies Network Discord at breakfastpuppies.com/discord. And if you want to help us out, please spread the word and help us build a community. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.